After my son's death, I didn't tell my daughter-in-law that he had left me a house, 2 cars, and a future she never expected. Do you know what it feels like when the phone rings in the middle of the night and you just know your world is about to break? It was 2:17 a.m. when the shrill sound cut through my sleep. My hand shook as I reached for the receiver, heart pounding with that old irrational dread we all carry, that nothing good ever comes after midnight. "Mrs. Holloway," a voice said, clipped and urgent. "This is Mercy Hospital. Your son Daniel has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately." For a moment, the room tilted. The lamp on my nightstand blurred the photographs of Daniel, and little Caleb seemed to swim before my eyes. I was already a widow. I had buried my husband 10 years earlier. But nothing had prepared me for the possibility of losing my only child. I grabbed the first coat I could find, still wearing my nightgown underneath my hair-uncombed slippers on my feet. The drive to the hospital felt like a dream I couldn't wake from. Every red light mocked me. Every second stretched into eternity. By the time I arrived, a grim-faced doctor led me into a private room. His eyes told me the truth before his words did. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway. The aneurysm was massive. There was nothing we could do. He's gone. Gone. Just like that. My Daniel. My brilliant, kind-hearted boy who still called me every Sunday to ask how my garden was doing. Hours blurred together, paperwork, signatures, decisions no mother should ever face. It was nearly noon when Olivia finally arrived. Designer sunglasses, perfect hair, manicured nails tapping against her phone. There was traffic, she said flatly, not even meeting my gaze. And I had to find someone to watch Caleb. I had already done that. I had called Caleb's school myself, arranged for him to stay with his best friend's family. Because that's what a parent, what a grandparent does when crisis strikes. I looked at Olivia, waiting for some crack in her glossy exterior, some evidence of grief. But when I said, softly, "Daniel is gone," all I saw was a flicker, surprise, maybe regret, quickly replaced by something else. Something cold. Calculation. Olivia's lipstick mouth formed a small O, her hand fluttering to her throat, in a gesture so rehearsed it might as well have been scripted. "But he was fine yesterday," she said, her voice catching just enough to pass for grief. "We had dinner, and then he was working in his study. I went to bed early. I didn't even say goodnight." For a heartbeat, I thought I glimpsed something real in her eyes. But it vanished, replaced by a look I knew too well after years of teaching psychology, not sorrow, but assessment. Like she was calculating her next move. As the hours passed, I watched her make hushed phone calls, always stepping out of the room when the staff came by. When the funeral director arrived, she deferred every decision to me, her tone light, casual, almost attached. "You knew him better than I did," she said once, adjusting her designer scarf in the reflective glass of the waiting room door. Better than she did. He was her husband. But she said it as if she were handing me a chore, not a sacred duty. And then when she thought no one was looking, I caught her reflection in the window, her face stripped of performance. No tears, no tremble, only cool calculation. A woman measuring what had just been lost and what she might gain. That was the moment a new kind of grief settled into me. Not just the grief of a mother who had lost her only child, but the grief of a grandmother who realized her grandson's future now rested in the hands of a woman who saw tragedy not as loss, but as opportunity. and I knew deep in my bones that I would have to be stronger than I had ever been before. Before I go on, can I ask you something? Which state or country are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know where in the world this story is reaching you. The church smelled of lilies and polished wood, but nothing could mask the heaviness of grief that clung to every corner. I sat in the front pew, my black dress too tight at the throat, my hands wrapped around Caleb's small shoulders. Beside me, Olivia played the perfect widow. Her dress was sleek, tasteful. Her tears, or what passed for them, dabbed away with a monogrammed handkerchief. To the crowd, she looked every inch the grieving spouse. But I felt it, the lightness of her weight, when she leaned against me, the way she straightened instantly whenever someone influential approached. And her eyes never rested on Daniel's casket. They scanned the room instead, measuring every mourner, recalculating her next steps. Caleb, on the other hand, sobbed until his face turned blotchy. He clutched my arm and whispered, "Is Daddy really in there?" His voice cracked, fragile as glass. "Yes, sweetheart," I told him softly. "His body is, but the part that made him Daddy, his love, his spirit, that's still with you." He nodded slowly, like he understood something adults often miss. I held on to him tightly, while Olivia leaned across me, hissing, "Sit up straight. People are watching." People were watching, and that was all that mattered to her. After the service, the line of mourners stretched long. Neighbors, clients, friends. Each shared stories of Daniel's kindness, reducing fees for struggling families, fighting cases no one else would touch, lending time and wisdom when people needed it most. I tucked their words into my memory like precious stones, knowing Caleb would need them someday. But even as I listened, I noticed Olivia slipping away, whispering in corners, her hand brushing the arm of a tall man I didn't recognize. The way they looked at each other was not the way a widow looks at a business partner. I filed it away, the way only a mother and a former psychology professor can. That night, when exhaustion pressed down on me like lead, Victor Lane, Daniel's longtime friend and attorney, approached. His eyes were rimmed red, his voice low. Margaret Daniel left clear instructions. "We'll need to meet tomorrow about the will. But for tonight, there's one thing he wanted you to know." He paused, searching my face. "Trust your instincts about Caleb." Those words burned into me even as Olivia adjusted her hair in a hallway mirror, already preparing for the next act of her performance. The next afternoon, I sat in Victor Lane's office, my palms damp against the leather chair. Olivia was there too, her posture flawless, her nails drumming softly on the armrest as if the outcome were already hers. Victor adjusted his glasses and began reading aloud. His voice was steady, professional, but the words shook the air like thunder. "To my wife, Olivia Jensen, I leave the lake house property, the Meridian investment portfolio, and a life insurance policy of $500,000. Olivia's lips curved faintly, smugness flickering across her face. But then Victor continued, "To my mother, Margaret Holloway, I leave the family home at 1742, Oakwood Drive, the Mercedes, the Range Rover, and my personal account at First National." Olivia's head snapped up. "That's impossible," she said sharply. "The house is ours, marital property." Victor slid a folder toward her. "The house was purchased in Daniel's name before your marriage, never converted to joint ownership. The deed confirms it." Her cheeks flushed, but she forced a brittle smile. "There must be some mistake. Daniel wouldn't have done this. But Victor wasn't finished. Finally, to my son Caleb, I leave an educational trust. Trustee Margaret Holloway. Silence fell. For the first time, Olivia's mask cracked. Her eyes narrowed, then darted toward me as if measuring how quickly she could manipulate the situation. "This makes no sense," she said, her voice suddenly soft-wounded. "Margaret, you already have your own house. Surely you don't intend to take this one from Caleb." I recognized the tactic, immediately turning obedience to Daniel's wishes into an act of cruelty, framing me as the villain. I kept my voice calm. "I'm as surprised as you are, Olivia. I need time to process all this." She nodded, feigning understanding, though her phone was already in her hand, fingers flying. When the meeting ended, Victor asked me to stay. He closed the door and handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in Daniel's bold handwriting. "Your son wanted you to have this privately," Victor said. His voice softened. He knew exactly what he was doing. Alone later in my quiet kitchen, I broke the seal. Inside was a single letter. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means the unthinkable has happened. I've made arrangements to protect you and Caleb. Olivia will fight you. Don't let her know what you know. Watch. Wait. Document everything. Thomas has the rest of my evidence. Protect my boy. I trust you. I love you." The words blurred as my tears fell. My Daniel, even as his life slipped away, had been planning protecting. He had seen what I was only beginning to recognize. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was war. 3 days after the funeral, I woke to the sound of Caleb's small footsteps padding down the hallway. His eyes were swollen, his pajamas wrinkled. "Grandma," he whispered, "Mom says we're moving. Next week." The words jolted me upright. "Moving. Where?" He shrugged. "She said to a new place, closer to the city, with Uncle Richard." Richard. The name snapped into place, the tall, slick man from the funeral, the one with Olivia's hand lingering on his arm. I pulled Caleb into my lap, my heart pounding. Not yet. Not this soon. Later that morning, Olivia breezed into the house like she still owned it, her heels clacking against the hardwood. She was dressed in sharp black trousers, her grief now repackaged as corporate efficiency. "Margaret," she said brightly, dropping her designer bag on the counter. "We need to talk about the house." I poured coffee without answering, letting the silence work. "This place is too heavy with memories," she continued, voice trembling, just enough to sound rehearsed. "It's not healthy for Caleb. We're better off making a fresh start downtown." Her eyes darted to the letter I'd hidden carefully in my desk. She didn't know I had Daniel's words, his warning. "I see," I said evenly. "And what does Caleb think about moving?" She waved a dismissive hand. "He's 8. Children adapt. What he needs is stability. And Richard and I..." She froze, her tongue catching on the name. "Richard," I repeated, slowly savoring the way her mask slipped. Her smile reappeared brittle and sharp. "He's a friend, a business partner. Don't twist this, Margaret." But I had already seen the crack in her performance. The widow costume was slipping, and underneath was a woman already planning her escape and willing to drag her son through the wreckage. I set my cup down deliberately. Olivia Daniel trusted me with Caleb, and I intend to honor that. We're not making any sudden moves. Her lips tightened, her perfectly painted nails digging into her palm. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're standing in my way. And trust me, you don't want to find out what happens to people who do that. Her words hung in the air like poison. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the tick of the old wall clock Daniel had loved as a boy. I leaned back in my chair, deliberately calm, though my pulse hammered in my throat. Olivia? I said softly. Threats don't bring your husband back, and they don't scare me. Her jaw clenched. You think that will matters? That some piece of paper can take my life away? Daniel was confused. Overworked, probably manipulated. By you. The venom in her voice nearly made me laugh if it hadn't been so dangerous. She needed me as the villain, the meddling mother-in-law pulling strings from the shadows. It made her own greed easier to justify. Daniel updated that will 3 months ago, I reminded her, my voice steady. He knew exactly what he was doing. Her mask shattered completely then. He was mine for 10 years, she spat. Do you think you can erase that with a lawyer's signature? He owed me. Every sacrifice I made, every year I wasted in this dead-end marriage. That house, those cars, the money, they belong to me. She was shaking now, her perfect composure collapsing into raw fury. Upstairs, Caleb's bedroom door creaked open. His small voice floated down the stairs. Mom Olivia straightened instantly, plastering on her widow's mask once more. Sweetheart, she called, her tone dripping with fake tenderness. Grandma and I were just talking. I looked at her, then really looked and saw it clearly. Daniel had been right. She wasn't just careless or selfish. She was dangerous. Dangerous to Caleb's future, dangerous to everything my son had tried to protect. That night, after Olivia stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, I unlocked Daniel's letter again. Watch. Wait. Document everything. So I began a journal. Every word she said, every time she forgot Caleb's medication, every night she left him with strangers, every threat she made when she thought no one else was listening, because grief had turned into battle. And if Olivia thought I was just an old woman clinging to her son's memory, she had no idea what kind of war I was prepared to wage for my grandson. The first entry in my journal was simple March 12th. Olivia said we are in her way. Caleb overheard shouting. She changed tone immediately when he appeared. It looked harmless on paper. But I knew piece by piece it would build into a picture no judge could ignore. Victor Lane called that same evening. His voice was low, cautious. Margaret Daniel left me more than just his will. He gave me access to certain records, phone logs, financial documents, even photographs. My breath caught. Photographs? Victor hesitated. I'm not saying your suspicions are correct. But Daniel had begun to gather evidence against Olivia. He was worried. Very worried. The next morning, a manila envelope arrived at my doorstep by courier. Inside were printouts of text messages between Olivia and one name that appeared over and over, Richard H. Richard Harlow, the man from the funeral. The messages made my stomach twist. When will you leave him? Soon. He's distracted with work. Don't rush me. Caleb complicates things. Complicates things. That's what my grandson was to her, an obstacle. Later that week, Olivia showed up at the house again. This time she wasn't even pretending to grieve. Her nails were painted crimson. Her lips glossed, her blouse cut low. She smelled of perfume, not sorrow. Margaret, she said sweetly, setting her designer sunglasses on the counter. I've found the perfect condo downtown. Caleb and I could start fresh there. But I'll need you to sign over the house. Daniel never intended you to live here. Not really. I stirred sugar into my coffee, deliberately slow. That's not what his will says. Her smile thinned. Wills can be contested. Do you really want months of ugly court battles? It would be so much easier if you cooperated, for Caleb's sake. There it was again, her favorite weapon. Using the child she neglected as a bargaining chip. I smiled faintly, hiding the fury burning inside me. I'll think about it. That night I added another entry to the journal, March 16th. Olivia demanded I sign over the house, threatened court battle, invoked Caleb's name again. Evidence suggests coordination with Richard Harlow. Every page, every note was a stone in the foundation I was building. Daniel had asked me to protect his son. I would honor that promise, word by word, record by record. That weekend, with Victor's encouragement, I had a technician install cameras in the house, discreet, small, tucked-in corners that Olivia never noticed. Officially, it was for safety after Daniel's passing. But really, it was for something much bigger. The first footage came within days. Olivia arrived unannounced, Richard trailing close behind her, like a shadow. She thought Caleb was asleep upstairs. She thought I was too frail, too blind to notice. Just a matter of time, Richard muttered, pouring himself a drink from Daniel's liquor cabinet. Olivia smirked, her red nails tapping the glass. Once the house is mine, once the trust is loosened, everything falls into place. I watched later, my stomach tight, as the recording showed her words clear as daylight. Not grief, not love, greed, calculation. On Sunday evening, Caleb came to me quietly, clutching his stuffed bear. His voice was small, but his words cut deep. Grandma Mom said if you loved me, you'd give her the house so I wouldn't have to move away. I froze. There it was, her poison dripping directly into the ears of a grieving child. I hugged him close, whispering, "You never have to choose sides, sweetheart. Daddy wanted you safe. That's all that matters." Later in my journal, I wrote with a hand that shook. March 22nd. Olivia manipulated Caleb directly. Recorded evidence of her plans with Richard. Pattern is clear. The next day, I placed a call to Victor. I think it's time I told him. His voice was steady. "Margaret, you've done everything Daniel asked. Now we move forward. Quietly. Strategically." I looked at the growing stack of pages in my journal. The USB drive of recordings tucked safely in my drawer, and Daniel's letter folded in my nightstand. The battle lines were drawn, and if Olivia thought I was going to roll over, she was about to learn exactly what kind of war a grandmother could fight. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. I'd been here before years ago when Daniel was sworn in as an attorney. Never like this. Never as a mother fighting her dead son's final battle. Olivia swept in late, of course. Black sheath dress, pearls her hair, styled into soft waves that screamed, "Devoted widow." Richard walked 2 paces behind her, not introduced, but everyone in the room could read the truth in the way their eyes flicked toward each other. Her lawyer, a shark in a pinstripe suit, wasted no time. "Your Honor, my client has been unfairly stripped of her rights. A grieving widow is being manipulated by her mother-in-law who seeks to control assets and a child that are not hers to claim." I sat perfectly still, Victor laying at my side, my journal in my lap like a weapon. Judge Harper turned to me. "Mrs. Collins, do you have a response?" Victor rose smoothly. "We do, Your Honor." He began with the evidence Daniel had left the revised will the trust for Caleb the deed with only Daniel's name. The shark objected, shouted about convenient timing. Then Victor placed the first USB drive on the table. The screen lit up. Olivia and Richard in my living room glasses clinking. Once the house is mine, everything falls into place. Her voice filled the courtroom like a blade. Olivia's hand shot to her throat, her face blanching. Whispers rippled through the gallery. The judge's eyebrows rose. Victor pressed on, steady as stone. "Your Honor, this is not grief. This is calculation, and it is not the behavior of a parent acting in a child's best interest." I didn't look at Olivia. I didn't need to. I could feel the heat of her fury burning into the side of my face. And then Judge Harper asked the question that cracked everything open. "Mrs. Collins, can you tell this court why your late son named you and not his wife as trustee of his child's future?" I stood slowly, my hands trembling only slightly. "Because he saw what I see now, Your Honor. He saw a woman who put her own desires before her child. And he wanted to make sure his son had at least one person who would never do that." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. The judge's gavel tapped once sharp enough to slice through the tension. "I've seen enough," Judge Harper said, her voice cool, decisive. "The will is valid. The trust stands. Custody of Caleb remains with his grandmother, Mrs. Margaret Collins, until further review. Miss Olivia Jensen will retain supervised visitation rights only. This court finds clear evidence of manipulation, neglect, and intent to remove the child from his support system. That will not be tolerated." For a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Olivia shot to her feet, pearls rattling against her collarbone. "You can't do this. He was my husband, my life." "Sit down, Miss Jensen." The judge cut her off. "This is not a theater. It is a court of law." Her lawyer tugged her sleeve, hissing for silence. Richard, pale but tight-lipped, stared at the floor. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, not in victory, but in relief. Daniel's plan had worked. His son was safe. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain. Caleb clutched my hand, his small fingers wrapped around mine with quiet certainty. "Grandma," he whispered, "does this mean I get to stay with you?" I knelt, looking into his wide, hopeful eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. You're safe here. Always." He nodded then, with the solemnity only a child could summon, said Daddy would be glad. I pulled him into my arms, tears spilling freely for the first time in weeks. "Yes," I whispered into his hair. "Daddy would be so proud of you." Behind me, Olivia's voice rose again, shrill with rage and humiliation. But I didn't turn back. Her battles, her bargains, her masks, they no longer mattered. The law had seen her truth. The world had seen it too. What mattered was the boy at my side, my grandson, Daniel's son. The legacy of a man who had loved enough to plan beyond his own death. And as we walked down those courthouse steps together, hand in hand, I felt Daniel with us. Not gone, never gone, but guiding us forward toward a life built not on fear or greed, but on love and the fierce promise of a grandmother who would never let go. Before I end this part, Let me ask you something. If you were Caleb's grandmother, would you have fought the same fight? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And that's the story, friends. A grandmother who refused to be silenced, who fought for love, dignity, and the future of her grandson. If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves true grandma stories, and subscribe to Eleanor Speaks, the place where we tell the stories of family betrayal and the quiet strength of women who refuse to disappear. Because here on Eleanor Speaks, every story is more than drama. It's a reminder that dignity and courage don't fade with age.